Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a bit different, an emergency deep dive, really. It's a TLDR audio overview of Simon Dixon's latest Bitcoin Heart Talk, episode 97. It just dropped September 12th. And the title tells you a lot. Qatar bombs, Poland drones, Venezuela strikes, and Charlie Kirk's assassination. So our mission, as always, is to try and cut through the noise, maybe follow the money a bit, and look beyond those headlines. Dixon's warning, these things are really happening now in real time. And just a reminder, we're exploring Simon Dixon's analysis here, presenting his views, not necessarily saying we agree with every point, but looking at the connections he's making.
Right. And central to all of this for Dixon is this idea he calls the proof of weapons network, or POW. He sees it as this really complex, often kind of hidden system. You've got corporate interests, financial players, military elements. Think military-industrial complex, but add technology, intelligence, and a financial-industrial complex. All working together, he argues, behind the scenes, managing resources, generating profit, often, outside the usual checks and balances.
Okay, so let's use that POW lens to unpack the first event Dixon highlights, that Israeli strike in Qatar. Looked like a pretty big escalation, didn't it? How does Dixon read that?
Well, his analysis suggests it wasn't just a random flare-up. He sees it as very deliberate, highly coordinated. The core idea, he thinks, was to strategically isolate Hamas from Qatar, basically breaking Qatar's role as a mediator. And for Qatar, it kind of gives them plausible deniability, doesn't it, to say, okay, Hamas, you got to go. They'd likely end up in Beirut or maybe Tehran, he speculates.
Right. And then there's the diplomatic angle Dixon points out, this new group emerging, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, France, the U.S. He says they're using financial leverage now, tying things like trade benefits for Israel, investments, tying them directly to actual steps towards Palestinian statehood.
Exactly. Essentially making peace, or at least progress towards it, the only really profitable way forward. It's part of what Dixon sees as a managed transition.
Okay, so if the Middle East is being nudged with financial incentives, Dixon sees something, well, maybe different, but just as calculated in Europe. Let's talk about those drones over Poland. 19 of them. That must have set off alarm bells about NATO's Article 5.
Oh, absolutely. But Dixon reads these incidents maybe less as a direct prelude to a war and more as what he calls narrative management. His take is that the goal here is to keep Europe in a kind of constant low-level fear. It helps solidify NATO, keeps everyone aligned, and crucially for his theory, it justifies the endless profits for this proof of weapons network he describes. Perception drives the spending,
Yeah, that makes sense within his framework. This POW network, military-industrial, tech intelligence, financial complex, it thrives on that kind of uncertainty. Dixon suggests the Ukraine war fits this too. It serves to kind of carve up Europe's spheres of influence, maybe leaving Europe more dependent, vassalized, as he puts it, from both East and West. It keeps the money flowing through these engineered crises.
It's about maintaining that flow.
Okay, so moving across the Atlantic now to Latin America. There was that U.S. Navy strike on a Venezuelan boat. The official line was counter-narcotics. How does Dixon see that?
Right. Dixon definitely challenges that official narrative. He argues the whole war on drugs thing can be a really useful cover story sometimes. From his perspective, it often masks deeper corporate interests, especially oil in this case, and maybe even helps fund covert ops for the POW network itself.
And the context there is pretty stark, isn't it? You've got Guyana with these huge oil discoveries, over 11 billion barrels. ExxonMobil, Chevron are right in there. Meanwhile, Venezuela's pushing its claim to the Essequibo region again, saying these companies are basically stealing their oil. Plus, you have that growing axis Dixon talks about, China, Iran, Venezuela challenging the U.S.
Yeah, and this is where Dixon sees the POW network kind of shifting its focus. Yeah. He thinks this strike signals a move towards, let's say, disciplining regions like Latin America. It's about fiercely protecting its hemisphere's resources, for corporate interests. And the costs. Inflation, debt. Dixon says that gets passed down to you, the citizen, eventually.
Wow. Okay, so to round out this look at the POW network's reach, Dixon also tackles the really shocking event, Charlie Kirk's assassination in Utah.
Yeah, and his analysis here as well, it's definitely provocative. He suggests events like this aren't necessarily system failures. He posits they might actually be integral parts of how this larger system, this POW network, operates. Almost like they're designed to create chaos and then profit from it somehow.
How does that work? He argues Kirk's death wasn't really about silencing him, but more about amplifying him, turning him into this sort of sanctified figure you can't criticize.
Exactly. The POW network, in Dixon's view, exploits these tragedies. It uses them to expand control, often through polarization, monetizing the chaos that follows. It fuels their objectives. And you saw it almost immediately, right? Trump politicized it, blamed the radical left. Then there was that executive order for a new domestic military unit to handle civil unrest. Dixon also points out how conveniently this diverted attention maybe from deeper questions about September 11th. It shows how assassinations in his framework can become these grimly useful tools for the network.
So pulling all these threads together, what's the big picture, according to Dixon? What does this all mean for us, for you listening?
Well, the overarching theme Dixon presents is this idea of a managed transition. We're moving to a multipolar world, he says, and the U.S. is kind of receding into more of a regional power, regional technocracy, he calls it, run largely by this POW network, which is now focusing its control and resource extraction more inwardly within its own borders instead of globally.
Okay. And given that analysis, what's Dixon's advice?
His main point is pretty clear. Try not to be a useful idiot, as he puts it, for this network's agenda. Don't get played by the narratives. Instead, he advises focusing on protecting yourself, protecting your loved ones, building what he calls personal sovereignty. An example he often uses is learning to self-custody Bitcoin, taking direct control of your assets, bypassing the traditional financial system that he sees as part of the POW network, sort of boycotting those key institutions.
Right. It raises a huge question, though, doesn't it? If political violence is sort of baked into the system, as Dixon's analysis suggests, what does real resistance even look like? Or even just real understanding? How do you actually see past the spectacle, past the headlines, to figure out what's truly going on? Something definitely to mull over.